Ronald Reagan predicted the exact problem.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
In one of his famous speeches, Reagan warned Americans about the priorities of the Democratic Party, and what he said back then sounds surprisingly familiar today. By the way, we just launched this channel, so if you enjoy content that cuts through the noise, hit that subscribe button and let's jump right into it.
In this vote harvesting time, they use terms like the Great Society, or as we were told a few days ago by the President, we must accept a greater government activity in the affairs of the people. Another voice says the profit motive has become outmoded. It must be replaced by the incentives of the welfare state. Or our traditional system of individual freedom is incapable of solving the complex problems of the 20th century. And Senator Clark of Pennsylvania, another articulate spokesman, defines liberalism as meeting the material needs of the masses through the full power of centralized government. Well, I, for one, resent it when a representative of the people refers to you and me, the free men and women of this country, as the masses. This is a term we haven't applied to ourselves in America. But beyond that, the full power of centralized government, this was the very thing the Founding Fathers sought to minimize. They knew that governments don't control things. A government can't control the economy without controlling people. And they know when a government sets out to do that, it must use force and coercion to achieve its purpose. They also knew, those Founding Fathers, that outside of its legitimate functions, government does nothing as well or as economically as the private sector of the economy.
While Bernie Sanders was smart enough to avoid using terms like the masses and stuck to phrases adjacent to it, with this new generation of progressives, that language is starting to come back, and it's a fairly recent shift. For instance, during Mamdani's campaign last year, Zoran and AOC openly described it as a movement of the masses. At first glance, that might sound harmless, but language shapes how people think. Framing politics this way slowly normalizes collectivism in our consciousness. And that's worrying because socialist ideas are on the rise right now. But Reagan didn't stop there. He laid out several ideas that sound very familiar when you compare them with what many Democrats are pushing today. So take a look.
For 3 decades, we've sought to solve the problems of unemployment through government planning, and the more the plans fail, the more the planners plan. The latest is the Area Redevelopment Agency. They've just declared Rice County, Kansas, a depressed area. Rice County, Kansas has 200 oil wells, and the 14,000 people there have over $30 million on deposit in personal savings in their banks. We have so many people who can't see a fat man standing beside a thin one without coming to the conclusion the fat man got that way by taking advantage of the thin one. So they're going to solve all the problems of human misery through government and government planning. Well, now, if government planning and welfare had the answer, and they've had almost 30 years of it, shouldn't we expect government to read the score to us once in a while? Shouldn't they be telling us about the decline each year in the number of people needing help, the reduction in the need for public housing? But the reverse is true. Each year the need grows greater, the program grows greater. Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything. Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant, it's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Exactly. These humanitarian goals are often used to justify the expansion of welfare programs across Democratic-led states. You can see it in California under Gavin Newsom with massive spending on homelessness programs, or in Minnesota where different initiatives ended up creating huge opportunities for fraud. Yet, we're constantly told that the way to fix any social issue is through throwing more money at the problem, hoping things will improve. And how do they plan to fund all of that? Through higher taxes. It's become so absurd that they've been flirting with the wealth tax for years now, and you can expect it to become a reality when the Democrats gain the majority again. Reagan even had more examples to share. You'd almost feel like this speech was delivered last month.
We were told 4 years ago that 17 million people went to bed hungry each night. Well, that was probably true. They were all on a diet. But now we're told that 9.3 million families in this country are poverty-stricken on the basis of earning less than $3,000 a year. Welfare spending 10 times greater than it was in the dark depths of the Depression. We're spending $45 billion on welfare. Now do a little arithmetic and you'll find that if we divided the $45 billion up equally among those 9 million poor families, we'd be able to give each family $4,600 a year. And this, added to their present income, should eliminate poverty. Direct aid to the poor, however, is only running about $600 per family. It would seem that someplace there must be some overhead. So now we declare war on poverty, or you too can be a Bobby Baker. Now, do they honestly expect us to believe that if we add $1 billion to the $45 billion we're spending, one more program to the 30-odd we have, and remember, this new program doesn't replace any, it just duplicates existing programs, do they believe that poverty is suddenly going to disappear by magic?
Nope, because all of that approach does is treat the symptoms instead of fixing the root causes. Yet every time there's a debate about reforming these programs, or even some efforts towards cutting some of the bloat, like with DOGE, Democrats immediately push back. No wonder the federal budget keeps sinking deeper into deficit. The same pattern shows up at the local level as well. Take Mamdani's proposed New York City budget. It expands spending on programs meant to support the masses, while also raising taxes to fund them. But higher taxes shrink the pool of people willing or able to pay, which eventually leads to even larger budget gaps. Reagan used examples like this to argue that the country no longer faces a simple left versus right debate. Instead, voters are left with a clear choice about the direction that they want to take the nation.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves. You and I are told increasingly we have to choose between a left or right. Well, I'd like to suggest there is no such thing as a left or right. There's only an up or down. Man's old age dream, the ultimate in individual freedom consistent with law and order, or down to the ant-heap of totalitarianism. And regardless of their sincerity, their humanitarian motives, those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course.
That's what it all boils down to. You'd increasingly hear politicians talk about left or right, but there is no such thing anymore. One could even argue that there never really was. The real difference is between leaders focused on improving the lives of everyday Americans and those more interested in serving special interests while getting rich because of their political influence. Don't get me wrong, there are capable and sincere politicians on both sides of the aisle, even if one party seems to have more of them at times. But Reagan's broader warning still stands today. It's one of those speeches that are timeless and continue to be relevant even decades later.